Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of the series Conscious Conversation, which is a series of live conversations with some of the most familiar names from the Shiatsu community. A series where we get to discover different bits from behind the scenes, from the special journey of our guest, and for the opportunity to share the space and ask questions as much as we feel the need to. So today's guest is Kindy Kaur. She's been wonderful enough to accept our invitation, and I'm really, really excited to discover more about her journey and to find out different bits that we probably haven't heard before. So, Cindy, welcome, and thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Please do say hello and introduce yourself a bit.
Hello, thanks for inviting me. And hello to everybody who's watching and tuning in. Lovely to see some friendly faces here. Um, yes, I'm in Nottingham and I have a shiatsu practice here. Um, I've been practicing for about 30 years and I also teach and I offer supervision to students and practitioners as well. Um, I trained at the British School of Shiatsu-Do, firstly in Nottingham with Linda Sharples. She was my first teacher. And then in London with Ray Rodolphi and Suzanne Franson, who were the principals at the time. That was in Primrose Hill in London. And many other influential BSS teachers along the way. Um, I was the principal of the British School of Shiatsu-Do in Nottingham. So I ran a branch of the BSS there and taught on the BSS teaching team as well. So now I'm not no longer running a school. I'm doing mainly postgraduate trainings, Shiatsu trainings, Shintai trainings, and I've also along the way, as part of my training, trained in various styles, 5 elements, Zen, TCM, and taught these as well. Um, I've had, after graduating, had worked with various other inspirational teachers along the way as well. So I've made a point of expanding my horizons outside of the BSS, and I continue to do that now. So worked with Pauline Sasaki, Cliff Andrews along the way, Suzanne Yates, Sonia Morisot. So they've all influenced my work along the way. My main teacher, who continues to influence me and has the greatest influence, has been Saul Goodman, who's the founder of Shiatsu ShinTai. Um, and we have a thriving Shiatsu ShinTai community here in the UK too, some of whom are here today. Lovely to see you all.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. You have an impressive career background, and I cannot wait to find out more about it, both in terms of the mentors and the teachers that have influenced your journey, but also in terms of bits and nuggets of wisdom that you've discovered on the way through your own practice and through your own experiment. Let's go all the way back to the basics.
Mm.
How did Shiatsu come into your life, and what made you decide to pursue this path?
Oh, crikey. Well, looking back, I think in hindsight, my whole life had been leading up to this point, which is often the case when you look back. Um, my background, I'll say a little bit about my cultural background. So my parents were immigrants from India, and so my heritage is Sikh. And so the cultural heritage of seva, of service, was always there. It was a part of my heritage. And my parents came to the UK in the late 50s, early 60s, and from a village in India. And I was the first of my siblings to be born in the UK. So I often think if my parents hadn't come to the UK, I probably would have grown up in a village in India. And who would I have been? Who am I? So that's been a theme for me. Who am I? And I think shiatsu really helped for me to negotiate that identity. It's been a big part of it. So it's in a way life positioned me, I think. I was always interested in science, the body. I started practicing yoga in my teens, and ended up doing a biology degree and specializing in molecular biology. So I was a scientist originally, and I guess my first introduction to shiatsu was through somebody I was working at Warwick University with, and he was studying shiatsu whilst doing his PhD, and he needed a case study. So I was his case study for him as a student, and had no intention of doing it. I was just his body in a way, someone to practice on. And it was a few years later when I was working as in the biotechnology industry as a research scientist, a molecular biology research scientist. As often happens, it was a kind of a crisis point in my life. It was a turning point in my life. So there was conflict at work. There was conflict in my personal life. Um, I had health issues, migraines, sciatica. So it was all part of the same picture. Um, and I'd burnt out basically. And that same issue of who am I in my work environment, in my science environment, in my cultural environment, in my personal family environment, that theme was around. And basically, just for some support, I started looking around for some kind of complementary therapy to help me. And there was a shiatsu evening class happening in Nottingham, which Linda Sharples was running. So I went along to that and I thought, wow, I remember this. I remember having these treatments. I hadn't thought about it since. And I thought, well, I'll go and do this foundation course with Linda Sharples. So that's what I did. And I just continued training. And I remember it was an anchor in my life at a time when there was chaos, basically in my personal life, my health life. Um, and it gave me, I remember it helped me with my health conditions, but it gave me a sense of self. It brought me back home to myself. So um, that theme around who am I didn't know it at the time, but it was starting to work on that theme. So I carried on training basically for my own personal support, my health support, but it was a kind of an awakening. I enjoyed the intellectual stimulation. I enjoyed learning about Oriental medicine, but at that point I didn't have any inclination that I was going to practice. And then it was when I was in my third year of training and I'd had enough in my work situation and I'd really come to some kind of crisis point and I knew something needed to change. So I gave up my job and I had nothing else to go to and I had a mortgage. And it was a bit of a leap of faith. Um, but I left my job and I set up my practice thinking, well, I'll need to get another job and shiatsu will just be on the side. And it was at that point that it went from a personal support, personal development training to something that I decided this is what I'm going to do. And it was that act of service also. This is something that I can do that's an act of service, which also feeds me as well. And I had no idea this was going to happen. You don't plan these things, but Linda Sharples, who was running the British School of Shiatsu, where I did my initial training in Nottingham, decided to retire. And she asked me if I would take over running the school. And I said, well, I've got no inclination to run a shiatsu school. I'm still in my third year of training. I haven't even graduated yet. So I thought nothing else of it. But I had written down on a piece of paper a job description for myself. And um, didn't have a title, but it had all the criteria where I wanted to work, the kind of people I wanted to work with, the kind of thing I wanted to do. It was quite vague. Um, and I put it away in my cupboard. And then a few months later, I looked at it again and I thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I was asking for. And it didn't have the title running a shiatsu school, but it fulfilled a lot of the criteria that I was looking at. Um, so I agreed to take on the running of the school, and I took my final exams on the Friday, and on the Saturday, I was running my first shiatsu class. Although I wasn't teaching, I had some great teachers from the BSS who would come in and teach for me while I did my teacher training. So it's a bit of an unusual path. Um, so that's how I came to shiatsu. That's how I came to running a school in shiatsu, and it was the most wonderful, rich, growthful time being part of the BSS teaching team. We would go and teach for each other. I would have some wonderful teachers coming in. I did teacher training with Ray Rodolphi at the BSS, and I also did a teacher training with Cliff Andrews. But mainly, I apprenticed some wonderful, wonderful teachers, and I'm so grateful for the mentoring, and it's on their shoulders that I stand. Um, and then I became a mother, and I carried on running the school for a while. But then I decided I could either be a mother to my children or to the school. So I handed over the running of the school to somebody else, and I stepped down at that point.
It is indeed a very unusual journey, like you've mentioned, but at the same time, so many pieces of the puzzle have been put together so that you get here. And I really want to reflect back at you the trust it seems that you had in yourself to just follow this journey, to see where it takes you. From that first encounter where you were the case study of the person that was doing the PhD, to the crossroads where you needed an anchor and you found it in Shiatsu, to then another crossroads where you discovered your sense of self. I think towards the end of it, everything just made sense, and it's wonderful that you share this with us. I'm wondering if you were to describe Shiatsu in its complexity, I'm aware of this, to someone who's just starting, to someone who doesn't know anything about the practice,
Hmm.
what would you tell them?
Oh gosh, where do you start? I think it would depend who I was speaking to. So I think one thing that's important is to speak in the language and the values of the person that you're speaking to. Um, so I tend to keep it quite simple, and I might talk to them about um, it being a touch therapy where you get to keep your clothes on. I have described it to some people as like a Japanese physiotherapy because that conjures up the image. Um, I've also described it as the healing aspect of the Japanese martial arts because that gets their interest. And I think the main thing is it starts a conversation. Um, so I often find that I don't need to say an awful lot to start with. If I can just start the conversation and they ask questions, I'll just answer their questions. But usually I'll be saying something about it's uses the power of touch to connect with their own healing wisdom. I might be talking about touch and stretches and movement to help um, to balance their system. Um, Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I usually say.
It makes sense. I mean, it's incredibly important to try to adapt and to relate to the audience, the person that we're speaking to.
Yeah.
One thing that came to my mind with regards to your scientific background, how
Mm.
do you think has this influenced your career in shiatsu or your shiatsu practice, if it has in any way?
Yeah, massively. People often say to me, but if you're a scientist, how can you do shiatsu? And I see no difference. I just see them as two maps that are describing the same terrain, but it's just a different way of approaching it. And I feel actually I would be a better scientist now than that I've been working with shiatsu. I have a much better understanding of science. But of course, the anatomy and the physiology and the pathologies all stood me in really good stead. Um, I like to understand, so with my shiatsu and when I'm doing energy work, and of course, now quantum physics is describing um, the terrain of ki of energy. So there is much more overlap. Um, but I like to understand. Um, everything's not explainable in scientific way, but I like to understand what I'm doing and what the basis of it is, and there is a lot of overlap. So yeah, no, it's massively informed my shiatsu practice and vice versa.
I love the fact that you mentioned that it's a symbiotic effect. So you don't just
Yeah.
have your scientific career being influenced by shiatsu, it's also the other way around.
Sure.
I'm curious whether you've encountered resistance along the way from people that you work with, from people who were probably not so familiar with the practice of shiatsu. Were there any
Yeah.
expectations that they were projecting that didn't work out, or?
Well, that was one of the issues when I left my job. I realized that my molecular biology job, I realized that I was training in shiatsu and I was interested in working with energy and holistic therapies. And I realized that there weren't many people I could be open with at that time. This was when was it? It was the late 80s, early 90s. And I realized that there's no point in trying to convince anybody, that I just walked my path, and in the end, I walked away from an environment that wasn't really supportive of what I was doing. I think that's changed a lot now. A lot has changed. Um, Along the way, there's always been people who doubt what I do. My family also couldn't understand why I was giving up a career in science to do this shiatsu thing. What on earth is this shiatsu thing? So I guess m- largely, I try not to get into conflict, and um, I just walked my path. And I think the proof is in the pudding that now I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I have made a success of it, whatever your version of success is. And my version of success is just having the freedom to do what I want. Um, so yeah, I don't pay a lot of attention to resistance, to be honest.
And that's incredibly honorable, and I'm glad that you've mentioned that. And I think it's also inspiring that you had the courage to pursue your own path and to question the norm in a sense. Even though you do come from a scientific background, and yes, there are a lot of correlations and they work
Mm,
together when it comes to science and shiatsu practice. But at the same time, you've noticed that the environment was not supporting you.
yeah.
So you took the brave decision to walk away. And I think that that's incredibly inspiring. Um, I'm wondering whether throughout your whole career, and of course with consideration to the client's confidentiality,
Mm.
you have any type of special moments or stories that you would like to share with us?
Oh gosh. Um, yeah, so many. It's such a magical path, um, a path of alchemy. Um, so yeah, we'll all have so many of those stories. I guess the one that surprised me, I remember a time when an older gentleman had come to see me, and it was a first treatment, and we booked him at the end of the session. It was just a regular, very simple, basic session. Um, and we booked him in for another session at the end. And the next day, I had a phone call from his wife, and she said to me, "My husband came to have a treatment with you yesterday. Um, he came home yesterday evening and he died." Now, the first thing that my mind immediately went to, oh my God, is my insurance up to date? Have I written up my notes correctly? Because I just thought she's phoning up to complain, and I panicked. And what she actually said was, he came home and he was at peace, and he was the happiest he'd been in a long time. And he went to bed that night peaceful, in calm, and he died in his sleep. And she said, "I'm phoning to thank you because," she says, "I think your treatment had something to do with that. And I don't know anything about shiatsu, but I just wanted to thank you." And the lesson in that for me was, one, my mind immediately went to, oh my God, someone's complaining. What have I done wrong? But also, the power of shiatsu, not just in life, but in death, in transitions, and um, with my parents also. I just that when they were both dying, and I was with them, that sense of, it doesn't have to be anything complicated or any complex diagnosis or theory, just that sense of presence, of being with somebody, just holding the hand. That is shiatsu, and that's powerful, and there's an alchemy in that. And all we're doing is helping them to do whatever they need to do, transition, whatever they need to do.
That is indeed an incredibly memorable story. And I'm
Mm.
wondering, because I can only imagine what can go through the head of a practitioner when we receive such news. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, how did you handle it in the moment? What are some tools and resources that you had
Mm.
available inside of you to navigate that moment?
I think in the moment, I was just in my center. We're so trained to be in our center, and I just dealt with what was there in front of me. It was afterwards that I realized that, oh my goodness, where my mind went. But actually, um, largely, I just listened to the widow and I thanked her. But these tools that we have of being in center, of being in our hara, of breathing, undoubtedly they're tools that serve us in those situations. And that's a real gift of shiatsu, that shiatsu is not just something that we do to somebody else. Well, it's not even something we do to somebody else. It's a path of self-development. It's a path of self-care, self-mastery, and from that place we touch, we hold space, um, and that's where the alchemy happens for the other person, because all we're really doing is helping them to connect with their own healing power, their own healing wisdom, their own body's intelligence, and whatever it needs to do.
I keep hearing this coming back to your hara, and I can only imagine, since I'm not a shiatsu practitioner,
Yeah.
how grounding that can be, and how motivating and how inspirational it can be to be able to handle yourself
Mm.
in moments like that. And I'm sure that that ripples outside of the session or the practice itself, because you then learn to be grounded in life, and you learn to approach life from this energy. Were there any difficult moments from your shiatsu journey that you would like to share with us? And
Mm.
I'm particularly interested in how you overcome them. I hear the hara and the groundedness,
Mm.
but in case there's anything else that comes up, we'd love to hear it.
I think, well, I mentioned before that it was a particular difficult time when I left my job, basically. When I left my job and didn't have anything else to go to. Um, and I just feel like life positioned me. Um, and how did I handle that? I think, you mentioned it before, it's just that trust, that faith, just walking the path, um, and avenues opened up. Um, I'm not quite sure what else to say about that, but yeah,
With this sense of
that's the one
trust,
that comes to mind.
thank you for mentioning that. Was this sense of trust something that you've had throughout your whole life, or is that something that you've developed, including through your shiatsu practice?
No, I think the shiatsu practice has developed that. I mean, it's sort of always, I think I've always been quite determined, quite um, yeah, I've always been quite determined to follow my path. But I think certainly the shiatsu has developed that. I mean, another time that was difficult for me was actually after I'd had my children, so I'd stopped running the school, and I came back to my practice when I felt ready, and my practice just wasn't taking off. It'd gone flat. I was struggling
Mhm.
with it. I had no school that I was running anymore. And there was that same theme again of, well, who am I now? And there was something around motherhood, becoming a new mother, um, not having a practice, not running the school. Who am I? And that was a real turning point. And I nearly gave up shiatsu at that point, actually. And I retrained as a school business manager and completely different. And um, and then I realized after I'd done my training and I'd qualified and I'd keep coming down to the last two people in the interview. And I found myself saying, but no, I won't work weekends. No, I won't work evenings. I've got two small children. No, I don't want to do that. And I realized I already had the lifestyle that I wanted. And it was about that time that so this was in 2006, I started to work with Saul Goodman. That was the turning point actually. And Saul Goodman, he was an influence in the early days of the British School of Shiatsu-Do. So I knew of him, but I hadn't worked with him. And the threads of his work wove their way through the British School of Shiatsu-Do anyway. So I was familiar. He was one of the early wave of shiatsu practitioners in the West. He worked with Matsunaga. He was a contemporary of Pauline Sasaki. And he used to come over to Europe to train. And on this occasion, he'd come to the UK, and I thought, well, I should probably go and work with him. Didn't know an awful lot about him, didn't know anything about Shintai. And he was doing this training called Central Channel Release. And I had no idea what this was. And part of the, if I'm honest, part of the reason I went on this training was just to get out of the house. I had two very small children. And and I wanted something for me. And I thought, well, I'll go and work with this Saul Goodman and I'll do this thing called Central Channel Release. I've got no idea what it is, but it gets me out of the house and it's shiatsu. Well, it absolutely blew my mind, this training. And something quite strange happened. I started getting headaches during the training, and I had old migraine symptoms that kept coming back. And after the training, they went, and my history of migraines completely went. And but during the training, what happened is I became so inspired by what he was saying and what I was feeling. And it's like this light went on. It's like I'd been plugged back into the mains. And I often describe it like and had an upgrade in my operating system. Something very fundamental changed
You took
inside
the
of me.
words out of my mind because I was about to make this reference.
It was. It's like I'd upgrade from Kindy 1.0 to 2.0. And it was like an awakening. And it was similar to when I first found Shiatsu. And it reminded me why I had fallen in love with Shiatsu in the first place. It was an awakening. And that, of course, it doesn't matter which style of shiatsu it is, but that reconnecting with the excitement and the inspiration of what you're doing. So then I continued to work with Saul Goodman, and he would come over from the UK, and I would work with him whenever he came over, and he was my teacher. And then he stopped coming over to Europe and the UK, so I then continued to go to the US to train with him, and then several of us in the UK and Europe did various teacher trainings with him. So now I teach Shiatsu ShinTai, which is it's an evolution of traditional Shiatsu, and that's largely the postgraduate trainings I'm doing Shiatsu ShinTai, and some of my own developments. So yeah, so yes, from a difficult point where I was going to give up shiatsu to refinding my passion again.
Yeah, and having a complete upgrade, both in terms of the practice and the style as well. Would you like to tell me a few words about Shintai Shiatsu? What makes it different or special
Mm.
for you?
It's an evolution of traditional shiatsu, developed by Saul Goodman over about 50 years. I think he's been developing it, and the word Shin Tai means source energy or core energy or something along those lines. So basically, the theme is that we're not aiming to heal or fix or cure. What we're doing is helping the person to activate their own healing power, to connect in with their body's own wisdom. So what drew me to it was its simplicity, actually, um, that I could not throw out, but put to one side some of the diagnosis, some of the complex theory, and for me, it was coming back to basics. Um, and the concept of it is that um, at, we're working with our life force, our energies that are activated at conception. So those energies are the governing vessel and the conception vessel, part of the extraordinary vessel system. And within those energies, so not just the lines, the meridian lines, but the developmental energies, is encoded the information for our original blueprint, the information for our development, the information, both physical development, but our true nature, our life path. Um, and so it's basically about coming into alignment with that. So we're bringing about alignment to the physical body. So it might be on a structural level, but also the emotional, the mental, the spiritual condition as well. So that alignment might be on the structural level, or it might be at the meridian or the fascia level, or we might be working with the chakras or the energy body. And so what I really liked was that it was a way of working with the whole of the energy system, from the most yin, from the most dense, the skeletal, the structural, all the way through the fascia, the meridians, the craniosacral system, to the chakras and the energy body, and meeting that person where we can best access their system, where they're best communicating with us to help them find their own alignment. Um, the thing that I found hard about it was that one of the things that we're doing is giving them space um, to activate their own healing ability, and so that often means taking our hands off. And in traditional shiatsu, we're taught to keep our hands on the body the whole time. So one of the hardest things for me was to learn to take my hands off and give them the space to activate their own healing wisdom.
Sounds like a wonderful practice, and I have so many other questions about everything that you've experienced so far. But I'm also very conscious of your time, so
Okay,
I'm gonna open the space in case anyone would like to prepare any questions. But before that, I still would like to ask you a couple more things, if you don't mind. And the
sure.
first question would be related to the Shiatsu community in the UK and of course beyond. I'm wondering, what are your hopes for the future of Shiatsu in the UK?
Yeah. Um, I think it's such a powerful therapy, and my belief and my experience is that shiatsu really transforms lives. Not just on a physical level, but it transforms um, perceptions, the way that we move through our lives, and so it also impacts on families, um, and therefore communities. And I I would like to see it become a much more a part of mainstream consciousness for self-care, for self-development. So not just, also people coming for treatments, but it being part of the self-care um, paradigm, so that we're not always relying on the healthcare system, which is, how it originally was, as a system of preventative medicine. Um, I would also like to see shiatsu schools continue to thrive. Shiatsu schools are the hub of our communities, and they keep shiatsu communities together. And wherever there's a shiatsu school, there's often a very vibrant shiatsu community and the ripple out effects of that. So, yeah, all power to the shiatsu schools.
Indeed, the schools, like you've mentioned, are the foundation even of the Shiatsu society and the Shiatsu community as well. So I'm going to weave in a little teaser for a promotional campaign we'll have next month for all the Shiatsu schools. They'll be in focus.
Great.
Um, I really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. I find your journey so inspiring and so powerful, and I really love to hear how you weaved in the science with your personal experience, with some wonderful stories from your path, from your career. Um, as a closing question from me, before we
Mhm.
open up to the rest of us, what are 2 or 3 things you would like to tell someone who's just starting on the Shiatsu journey? Maybe think about your first few days, but
Oh,
if you
yeah.
were to just drop a couple of things for them, what is it that you would like to tell them?
Oh, I'd say just do it. It's a magical, magical journey of self-realization. You can't know the journey that you're about to go on. Um, I would say follow what inspires you, follow what lights you up, follow what excites you. Um, I would say remember to receive treatments while you're training, but after you've finished training, um, I think as practitioners, often we have to remember to learn to receive treatments, but to receive compliments, to receive gifts, to value shiatsu, so to receive payment. Um, I would say make sure that you have a self-development practice, whether it's yoga or qigong or doin or whatever it is, that that's what's going to sustain you, and you're going to need something that sustains you, but it's also what feeds your practice. Um, and just be truthful with yourself and with others. There's several there. There's so much I could say about this.
we've added a bonus one. So we have 4 so far. I have follow what lights you up.
Yeah.
Remember to receive treatments, gifts, compliments, and even exchange for the services that you're providing. So do not be afraid to charge for your services. Remember to be truthful and find a self-development practice that can keep you grounded. Kindy, thank you very much for your wisdom, for your willingness to share your journey with us. In case any of our guests have any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and we'll spend a few minutes answering that. I'm going to just have a look at the screen, see if there's any microphone being unmuted. My invitation going once, going twice.
Lots of smiley faces.
I've seen your microphone getting open.
Kindy, thank
Hi,
you.
Kit.
So wonderful to hear you telling your story. I'd like to ask whether you have a particular daily practice.
A particular daily practice.
Mm.
I do Qigong. I do yoga. I don't do the same thing. I do meditate. I breathe and I meditate daily. But I do have a Qigong practice. I have a yoga practice. And I will do which of those I feel like doing on the day, but I will do something every day. Or I might go for a walk in nature. That is part of my regular practice as well. I try and keep myself physically active, so I might swim. I like hiking, but anything that gets me out in nature really feeds me. And yeah, the yoga and the qigong.
Thank you.
How about you? Do you have a daily practice, Kit?
Well, since I came on the craniosacral what was it called?
Cranial sutures.
Cranial sutures.
Mhm.
Yeah, I also do some qigong and some yoga, but at the moment I'm doing the self suture tuning in quite a lot.
The proprioceptive practice for the
Yeah,
cranial sutures. Yeah, it's so powerful.
and I
Great
do it
practice.
if I'm awake in the night. I do it
Yeah,
just
yeah,
lying there, or if I'm on the tube,
yeah. And you can do it anywhere,
you
can't
can do
you?
it anywhere.
And
Yeah,
of course, yes, the proprioceptive practice, the light body activation proprioceptive practice, which is part of the Shintai practice. It's part of our self-development practices, of course, part of my practice as well, that I dip in and
yeah.
out of. Yeah.
So yeah, I like the Kindy 2.0 and where it where it leads.
Thank you, Kit. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, I think you have a workshop coming soon, right?
I've got a workshop in July on, so it's part of the Shintai work, and it's called cranial sutures for spinal alignment. So it's a way of making structural adjustments of the spine, but from the head, from the cranial sutures, from the joints of the skull. So it's quite subtle work, but we develop our perception, we develop our energy sensitivity to be able to tune into those through proprioceptive circuits. Yeah, so it's great. It's a
Sounds
great thing to do.
fascinating. Yeah, I'm glad you've mentioned it. Kit, thank you very much for the question. In case there's anyone else who would like to ask the question, now is your chance. And if not, Kindy, I really appreciate everything you've shared with us. I've learned so many things about Shiatsu, and I felt very inspired by your journey. And I'm sure many people can relate to what I said earlier. Thank you for your time, for your energy, for your resources. The recording will be available on YouTube, so in case anyone has a question after the session, please feel free to leave the questions in the comments and we'll do our best to answer all of them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to everybody who's here. And I just want to say one last thing, which I don't often get to get to say because I don't see all my shiatsu colleagues and teachers so often now. And I just want to say how grateful I am for the journey, the shiatsu journey I've been on, my lineage of teachers and mentors, my colleagues, the BSS teaching team who I've taught with, students along the way. You've all been part of my journey, and I love you all.
Oh, wonderful.